Hi, my name is Greg. I'm an alcoholic. I have had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Thanks to a loving God, meetings like these, people like you, 2 Big Book Step Study sponsors, I get to be here today. I have completed most of my amends, not all of them, working the latter steps, living in the principles of all the steps to the best of my willingness on a daily basis. Karen, thanks for asking me to be here today. This is awesome. It's good to see some friends. I haven't been out to a lot of real world meetings since the whole COVID thing started. It's just been a couple of months I'm starting to get back in the swing, and boy, what a difference, that I get to come and see my friends and people who understand. Anyway, so I guess I'm here to share on step 3. I will qualify as briefly as I can, but as I'm reading through this, what we read here today, I'm like, well, a lot of my qualifying is really important to how I ended up at step 3 in the first place, so I don't know how it's going to go. I've already asked God for help. It's time for me to trust Him. So anyway, I didn't start drinking real early, but what I'll say is this: when I was just turned 16 years old, I had that magic moment where all of a sudden I realized what the solution was. I was at a party. I was with some friends. I had a girlfriend I had to dump because something happened that I was ashamed of and I couldn't face her anymore. And I didn't have the guts to do it, and somebody handed me a bottle of blackberry brandy. I took exactly the right amount for that particular moment, which happened to be 3 shots. And that was all I could get that night for whatever reason. And good thing, because my pattern, even to that point, had already become drink as much as you can, as fast as you can, throw up, wipe your mouth, and keep drinking until it ends. And so I didn't really ever have that moment before that time when everything was okay, because I'd just blow right by it, So that particular night anyway, I took 3 shots of blackberry brandy. I got just the right amount of drunk for me. I felt a sense of ease and comfort. I dumped my girlfriend. I hooked up with her best friend the same night, and off I went, truly believing that alcohol was the solution to all of my fears and problems. And I chased that for a long time. I got married when I was 25, so had the house, had the dog, had the cat, had the car, 2 cars, good jobs, all that, and I was caught in my life. And the girl I'd been with for 4 years got to see what I really drank like. And she would come home from work sometimes, pick me up off the floor and have to put me to bed. And she decided very quickly that she couldn't live that way. So our marriage lasted just about 2 years, and she was like, I'm gone, I can't do this. And I thought she was right. I understood it. And as best I could love someone, I think I loved her. So, I quit drinking, because it basically all boiled down to I can't watch you drink yourself to death, So I quit drinking. And this actually was really, in a lot of ways, the opposite of step 3 for me, because I had quit drinking. I had not turned anything over to God. I had not admitted powerless. I quit drinking because I wanted something to happen, and I thought this was a means to my end. And so, my best thinking kicks in, right? What do you do when you quit drinking? Well, when people quit drinking, they go to AA. So I went to AA, and I learned all kinds of stuff in AA, like don't drink, ask for help, go to meetings. It works if you work it, even though I don't know what it is. Right? So I'm working whatever I can, and I was a very good fellowshipper. Not proud of that, but nonetheless. So, I spent many years in Alcoholics Anonymous, not in this book, but reading this book, not understanding a word of it, going on commitments, carrying my message as best I understood it, and I could make it sound good. I could. I spent a lot of time up in front of people making them believe that I know what I'm talking about. So if I start to say anything that begins with I think, you can probably stop listening, okay? Anyway, that didn't do me a whole lot of good. She never came back. I never changed. And I had no idea that that was part of this deal. I never changed one bit. And so over the course of the next 15 years or so, you know, I had a girlfriend every 6 months. She always left for the same reason. The face was replaced. The problems were exactly the same. You know, and I just kind of tore through life trying to get what I wanted. And without getting into any details, you know, I did a lot of harm that I was totally unaware of for that entire time. I was just an alcoholic without a solution, because I would not drink, because I'd at least come to the point where I was like, well, if I drink, everybody knows I'm not supposed to drink. And I know I'm not supposed to drink. And that was about as well as I understood alcoholism. So, you know, in early failures with staying sober, you know, I learned that really quickly, that there's the turning point as soon as you know you're not supposed to drink. So when I drank after I knew I wasn't supposed to drink, it was basically just with a vengeance, on a mission. It was ugly, it was private, it was secret, as best I could keep it. I never wanted anybody to see me drink, so I had to drink as much as I could, as fast as I could, right back to when I was 15, right? And that was all there was to it, and that was not something that, in my mind, was sustainable. I don't know what the logic was behind it really, but I was like pretty proud that I got up and went to work every day, and that I held my job and I collected my paycheck, and I wasn't destitute, you know, and so I was a solid maintenance drinker. You know, I didn't drink very much during the day, except on weekends, and at night I drank enough to get me to pass out, and woke up and started over again. That was my drinking pattern for I'd like to say most of my later drinking, but that was really just my 20s. Anyway, long story short, so into the book. An extreme example of self-will run riot. Our actor is self-centered. Still, the play does not suit him. He becomes angry, indignant. I love this phrase, he decides to exert himself more. All right, because that was my answer sober to anything that confronted me in life, was just, well, I'll just double down on self-will. I will try harder. I will think harder. I will get heavy. I will get heavy, and I will steamroll whatever's in front of me. So I wanted to share an example of this. Now, at 12 years sober, I met a girl. I had decided at this point that it was time for me to get married. I was 37 and had no interest in having kids after the age of 40. So that was my plan. So I met this girl. She knocked my socks off. 3 weeks later, we were engaged. 3 months after that, we were married. This is a bad idea for me. I don't know. You do what you want. It was a bad idea for me. All right? Because I didn't really know anything about her other than the things she was willing to tell me. And I learned much later that she's willing to lie at certain times. Not that I wasn't. Anyway, so we got married. She had 2 boys from previous relationships, 2 separate fathers. The father of the younger one was a Worcester City cop. He was a bad dude, and I mean that in a lot of ways, not somebody I should be messing with. He didn't exactly get the memo that he was out of the picture, and so things proceeded, all right? So, you know, I got called down to the Millbury police station one time. I was living in Millbury, still live in Millbury. You know, to be questioned about a possible assault on a minor. You know, and I am not saying that I didn't do things, but what I'm saying is that kind of caught me by surprise, and I realized very quickly that I was playing a game that I did not belong in. all right, that I had, and I had participated in setting the ball rolling. You know, I filed a criminal complaint against him, and we just went back and forth for a couple of years while this custody battle was going on, ultimately because I was absolutely terrified. You know, and I didn't learn any of this fear stuff or any of what I was doing really until well into my fourth step and beyond. So when it was happening, it was just like, look, I wanted to marry this girl. You're in my way. I'm going to get you out of my way. Oh, you won't get out of my way? Here, let me call on other higher powers, like your higher power, right? And so, you know, it just escalated, and I had no sense at all of the harm I was doing to the woman I said I loved and married, her children, her children's father, right? Who, you know, I do bad things to him, it hits the kid. It hits the kid, it hits the mom, it hits the mom, it hits me. So I was basically in this big cycle of self-destruction. I had no idea how it worked, how any of it worked, and I could have cared less. Because I was so hell-bent on just getting my way. You know, now this is, remember, 12 years sober. Okay, so I don't even have drinking to blame, and I don't have drinking to help. So anyway, somehow we stayed married, and 5 years later, I had surgery, and this is a familiar story to quite a few of you, I'm sure. I got sent home with a little bottle of Perks, and, you know, before I ever took them, I knew what was going to happen. And I was like, you know, the book talks about Jim in More About Alcoholism. He sensed that he was being none too smart. I said to myself, this is going to end badly. I said it to myself. I took the pills anyway. By the time I'd got to the third or fourth dose, that take 1 to 2 every 4 to 6 as needed for pain became take 2 every 4 and more if you have pain. Now, that was the beginning of the end, all right? That was the first moment at which my powerlessness was demonstrated. But really what happened is I finished the pills. They went away for a year. I had another surgery. They went away for another year. I had another surgery. And by the time I was done, I had my left knee operated on, my right shoulder, my left shoulder. I had a discectomy in my spine. I had my rear end operated on. I'd cut myself with a chainsaw, and so had to have my leg operated on. Don't use drugs and operate heavy equipment. But you know what my reaction to all that was, is at this point I had back problems, and I had a running prescription for Percocets. I couldn't figure out how to do the math. I could no longer figure out how to make 120 pills last for a whole month. So whenever I got hurt, I was like, ha-ha! Right? I don't have to count this week. And I was very happy about that. Ultimately, after 5 years of taking the prescriptions, somewhere in there, you know, I'd had 2 kids, and I'd had them just before I started getting back on the drugs. And so the first 5 years of my youngest daughter's life, essentially, I was high as a kite. Eventually, it led me back to a drink. And this was the moment I needed, right? So 22 years after I had quit drinking on my own power and failed with the drugs, but still hadn't drank, I was confronted with a bottle of vodka because I couldn't make that 2 days in between prescriptions. And it was that moment, that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, right? When I was finally beaten badly enough, and this chapter kind of starts with that, right? Whether or not he could be capable of being honest, right? And to that point, I couldn't, because I hadn't really understood that I was absolutely powerless over any substance that made me feel better. And so I have this bottle of vodka. I don't want to drink it. I got to go pick up my kids. They're now about 3 and 5 years old. I know if I drink, I'm going to be drunk really quickly, and I'm going to be driving drunk. And I'm going to have to be in the presence of normal, sober people in front of my children that I probably won't be able to say anything to because I don't know what's going to come out. And I mean, I don't know if they're going to be words or just gibberish. And I'm terrified, and I drank anyway. And I knew that it was going to happen as soon as I saw the bottle. There was no turning back. There was zero power of choice in that moment. So this begins the honesty. After 22 years of not drinking, finally I understand what it means to be powerless. I absolutely believe that without step one, there's no point in the rest of this work, because I tried it without step one. I kind of did the best I could. I don't know. But willingness is hard to come by until I'm desperate, right? So I was willing to do some stuff. I would say the third step prayer all day long. That's not the third step, right? I wrote an inventory. I read it to somebody. It's not exactly the fourth and fifth step just because you wrote some stuff down. You know, there's that whole thoroughness and honesty aspect to step 4, which if I don't have the willingness, if I'm not desperate enough, I'm not honest enough. So I wrote an inventory that was really just about trying to figure out a way to make it other people's fault. Anyhow, so my experience with step 3 has been varied, right? I used to go on retreats with friends and go into the chapel and say the third step prayer as our first act at the retreat. And it was supposed to be a way of kind of opening myself to God. And, you know, we'd go in there and we'd say the prayer. One of my friends would always be like, "Can't you feel it?" Nah. I didn't say no. I wasn't able to be that honest, but I'm like, what? I want to feel it. Something's wrong, you know? And I never felt it. I had the prayer memorized, and I said it all the time. And I kept saying it, and I never really understood how it all worked. Funny, I hadn't done the work, so there's no chance of understanding. At least that's what I know now, is that the understanding comes after, not before. And as someone who likes to know exactly what he's getting into before he actually takes any steps or commitment of any kind, that was not an easy sell until the desperation happened. Anyway, so we're still married. 18 years, and that's not thanks to me. That is not thanks to me, because, you know, I mean, my best thinking during that marriage got me drunk again and got her, you know, ready to leave. When I came back, we were at the point where we were just saying to each other how much we hated each other, you know. And I didn't really hate her, but if she was going to tell me that, what else was I supposed to do? You know, it's just manipulation, retaliation, whatever, anger and resentment all over the place. Anyway, so when I came back, I really believe I had already done step 3 before I got sober. What had happened was this. I drank, I knew it was over. Before I ever drank, this is about October of 2015, the wheels were coming off. I had been taking the pills all day, every day for almost 5 years, or somewhere around 5 years. And I was in my car on my way to work, and I was just, the wheels were coming off in my head. I had no idea on that particular day how I was going to keep my act, and it was an act, keep my act together. I was on the verge of applying for a promotion. This was putting great pressure on me. As a professor, the way we get promoted is that we have to create this massive catalog of how great we are, right? And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, you're not great. You're barely hanging on. I couldn't even imagine beginning the lie of documenting in 100 or so pages, you know, what I wasn't, and trying to come up with evidence to support it. I could do it. I actually did it. But that was kind of some of the pressure I felt to really kind of, you know, to live the lie. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I already had believed in God. In a sense, I had already known my own powerlessness, even though I hadn't come to that ultimate moment yet. And I just said, God, do what you got to do. And that, I believe, was my first real third step prayer. And in that moment, I was absolutely horrified because I had thought about this. If I turn my will and my life over to God, and I had probably thought about it in those words because I had heard those words hundreds and thousands of times at this point, I can't control what he's going to do to me. So I was imagining that if I say, okay, God, go ahead, whatever you got to do to get me sober, that he might end up having me kill one of my kids or drive through the back of my garage or something that would be catastrophic and unliable, if that makes any sense. I don't mean liable like liability. I mean like I wouldn't be able to lie my way out of it. There would be a reality there that other people would witness, and that horrified me. Anyway, but eventually it worked because then the bottle showed up, and I really think this was what God had in store for me. That bottle had been in the house for 10 years, I bet. My wife drinks a little bit occasionally, pretty much never vodka, but, whatever. Anyway, so let's fast forward to now, right? I meet a guy when I get sober. I ask him how to do this. He says, I read the book. I start going to meetings. I start reading the book with him. I meet another guy that I knew from back in the AA 1990s in Worcester, and he's familiar, so I'm like, hey, how do you do this? And he's like, read the book. I'm like, all right, can we get together? And he becomes my sponsor, and he's like, yeah, and you got to go to these Big Book Step Study meetings. Or he says, no, he never said that. He said, I suggest. I think it would be good. All right, if you're going to do this work for me, it'll help you. And the funny thing is, I always thought that he was testing me. So I asked him about this meeting. It was, I think, the Pleasant Street Wednesday night meeting. And he's like, nah. And it's not that he had anything against the meeting, I don't think. But he's like, nah, that one's not a good one for you. And I was like, well, what about this other one in Worcester? And he's like, nah, I don't know about that one either. He's like, there's a good one in Natick. And I'm like, dude, I drive 3 hours a day just to get back and forth to work. Do I really have to do another hour and a half of driving just to go to a meeting? Like in the book, it's the same. He says, I don't know, you might like this one, you should try it. I ended up going to this one out in Marlboro on Wednesday nights, and it became my home group, and Big Book Step Study changed my life. Mostly because I was willing, right? So I'm sitting in the car in Friendly's parking lot out in Holden with my sponsor. He's told me to bring a notebook and a pen and a ruler. So I do it because at least to this point, I know I am powerless, right? 3 pertinent ideas. I am an alcoholic. I know what it is now. It means I cannot. And I cannot manage my own life. And this has nothing to do with alcohol itself. That's a part of it, but that's not really the deal. No human power can relieve me of my alcoholism. I've tried every human power possible. They didn't help. God could and would if he were sought. That's all I got left, right? So I am desperate. I believe in God. Now I have to believe that God is going to do something if he is sought. I'm defeated enough to be willing to do whatever my sponsor tells me because that's the only power that I think I can trust at this point. And I had this trust that the book had an answer in it. And that my sponsor to this point had started to show me things that I had never seen before in this book, even though I'm an English professor. Words in there that I always understood and never even saw. And so it was beginning to happen for me. We hold hands. We say the third step prayer. it still doesn't mean anything to me. But he says, now you got to get to work. All right? He described the third step as the contract or the promise to continue the work. All right? What I understand now is that, and it says it right here, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in our lives, in ourselves, which had been blocking us. Things that I was not aware of at that point. But I've got to trust that if I keep doing, it's going to start happening. And so it is an act of faith. That's the principle of the third step, faith. I don't know that it's necessarily faith in my higher power, because I'm not so sure I was really there yet. But it's faith that I can get better if I do this stuff. I absolutely had at least that much belief. So he said, now you got to write. And I'm like, now? And he's like, yep. Get your notebook out. We're going to draw some lines. We're going to make some columns. You're going to do your first one with me, and then you're going to go home and get writing. Anyway, so that was the beginning, really. You know, that's when things start to change, because as soon as I started writing, I started becoming aware. I'd say it wasn't until I got to the turnarounds that I started really understanding how I was. You know, my selfishness, my dishonesty, the things that this chapter talks a little bit about. Have I gone overtime yet? Can I just stop right here? I think I might have had one more thing to say. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Right? He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Let me just finish with today. All right, what it's like today. More like what it was like 2 days ago. Today's not a fun day. So I was at home the other day, and I was getting ready to go to a meeting. I think it was Wednesday. And my wife asked me to get the air conditioner out of the window, and I'm like such a great guy that I'm like, yeah, sure, honey. She'd asked me about 30 times already. But I'm going to go do it this time. So the air conditioner, the window's kind of jammed. So I hit the window goes up, the air conditioner goes down. Now, I had taken out already half a dozen air conditioners this week at my house, at my mother's house, so I was really good at it and didn't need any help. Yeah, and I'm watching it, and all I could think of was that scene in Die Hard when Alan Rickman is falling backwards in slow motion, right? And this air conditioner is looking up at me as it's falling down, and I'm like, no! So that was fine. You know, it's just a piece of metal. But then my wife comes running in, because somewhere in there I had literally shouted, no! And she's like, what happened? What's going on? And she looks at the window and she knows. And she runs over and she looks down, she sees the air conditioner on the ground, she starts cracking up. And I was like, instantly, what the bleep? And I go into self-preservation mode, right? My fear, my ego, all this stuff is triggered automatically. And I'm like thinking to myself, now thank God I didn't say anything. You know what? I was thinking, if you had never asked me to do this, right? What came out of my mouth, and I really believe this is the result of what starts with the first 3 steps, I probably should have asked for help. And I was like, who was that? Who said that? Then my daughter comes in. She just turned 12 years old, but she's really more like 8 in most ways. She looks out the window. She looks at Mommy. She looks at Daddy. She's not really sure what to do yet. Mommy's cracking up. Daddy doesn't look like he's cracking up. She starts cracking up. I was like, I'm going to go get the air conditioner. Because this is that moment where I've learned that I need to pause which I don't usually do. And I'm doing it. And it's like the book says, I practice enough at this stuff, and all of a sudden it becomes intuitive. I go down and I get the air conditioner, and my wife and daughter are both big shit-eating grins looking out the window down at me 15 feet below. How's it look? Anyway, so the long story short is I'm standing down there, and while I really want to pick up some rocks and throw them at them, I realize that my job here is just to let them laugh and not interfere with that. Anyway, that's about all I got, and hopefully there was enough of step 3 in there. God bless you. Thank you for being here.